back, everybody. We've been talking a little bit about populations versus samples, but what goes into taking a good sample? This is a slight detour, but it's crucial to knowing what goes into taking a good sample. So let's have a look. Here's our overview as always. We are going to talk about samples, the wisdom of the crowd, issues with sampling and representativeness, and we're going to talk about some issues in social science research. Samples. So, you are going to pause this video and go and watch this real quick, and I'll be here when you get back. Pause me. Don't just go and watch the video. Okay, I'll be here when you get back. Okay, you back? Hopefully you watched this and you saw how if you take a large enough sample, even though some people's samples were wildly high or wildly low, from 400 to 50,000, you get really, really close to the true number of jelly beans if you ask enough people, which is kind of at the essence of sampling, that if you take a large enough representative sample, you'll eventually get to the truth. So let's see. Our first example. How much do you study? I want to know how many hours a week on average students at UT study, so I go to the library, maybe the PCL, not right now during times of COVID, but one day, and randomly ask 100 people, how many hours a week do you spend studying? So pause me again for a second here and think, what are some issues with this kind of sampling? I'll wait. To collect a sample of 100 people, how do I select them? Am I just like, you, you're right there, let's go. We could use simple random sampling, which is the best thing that you could do. This would be your entire population here, and we would randomly, using a random number generator, select the people that we need. So simple random sampling. Sadly, there's little simple about it. It can actually be quite difficult to achieve. You first have to define your population of interest, which we already have, all of the UT students. But the second part is the hardest part, which is that every single person in that population has to have the same probability of being selected. Is that true for our UT example I just mentioned, where I go to the library and ask the students that are at the library how often they study? Think about that one again for a sec. So we are not going to go through all of this. This is just for your own knowledge in case you ever need to refer back. But these are the different kinds of sampling. Go from, you can sample. There's non-random, which involves some systematic sampling, or convenient sample, like I just mentioned when I go to UT and just ask the people around me. Then there's random sampling, and there's random, stratified, clustered, and it goes on. I highly encourage you, if you are into research and research methods, to look into some of these different sampling techniques. So let's go back to our UT example. I want to know how many hours a week an average student at UT studies. So I go to the library, randomly ask 100 people, how many hours a week do you spend studying? So go back to some of the issues you thought earlier. Any of them on this list? Have you thought of a few other ones? What about the students that study at home or at a cafe? Pre-COVID. Or what about the time in the semester? People are camping out in libraries at the end of the semester during finals week sometimes. What about the different types of majors? Maybe some majors spend a lot more time studying than others. Maybe certain majors you're writing more than you are studying. What about the day that I ask? If I were to ask people on a Friday, maybe they would not remember all of the horrors of studying during the week. Or what about the different types of work they're engaging in? Instead of just studying for an exam, maybe they're doing homework, maybe they're doing essays, maybe they have to read a lot. So we didn't do a very good job, or I didn't do a very good job with my sample to try to answer the question, how many hours on average does a UT student study? Now we can see that our quick, easy question to determine the average number of hours UT students study needs a lot more clarification. This is part of that conceptualization and operationalization thing we talked about last time. So how can we rephrase this question and better define the population? So these are more specific and do a much better job defining the population and the variable of interest. So here, what is the average weekly amount of time a freshman engineering student at UT enrolled in 15 hours spends on classwork outside of the classroom? So that could be homework, studying, or building something, as engineers do. Now we're asking a much more specific question. How about the next one? What is the average amount of time per week a senior English student at UT enrolled part-time spends working on classwork outside of the classroom? So again, reading, writing, studying for things. Again, a much more specific question. These two questions are much more specific and clarifying, and that is what you want when you're going to go out and try to answer a research question and take a sample to answer that question. Now let's talk about some of the issues in social science research. Where do you think most of the samples are drawn from for a lot of social science research? You all! It's from college students because you all need to get credit for some classes and you're easily accessible. Have any of you had to do any of these research hours for credit in a class? I know I had to do it for extra credit as an undergrad, and I tried to take it seriously, but I know from my own experience as the researcher, having some undergrads do my survey last year, some people are not paying attention. The 20 to 30 minute long survey, and some people were finishing as quickly as 2 minutes. Some people just wrote agree all the way across, so college students may not be the best subjects, but what else is wrong with maybe only using college students as the sample? So some other issues with this are that college students are usually of a certain age range. Some college students are maybe from higher socioeconomic backgrounds and more affluent, though that's changing now with scholarships and financial aid. But what else makes a college student different from the rest of the US population? Just the fact that you're in college makes you different from the majority of the US population. So now let's actually look at, if you sample from college students, are they even racially and ethnically representative of the US? So what do you think the racial and ethnic demographics of undergraduate students at UT are? Take a moment, take some guesses, fill this in, pause me, try to figure it out. So what percent do you think of UT undergraduate students are white, non-Latinx, Black, Latinx, Asian, foreign, and other? Other is a bit mysterious, but it probably includes things like more than 2 races or any races or ethnicities not listed here. And are you back? Did you take a minute? Did you just let it keep playing? Take a minute, yes. All right, let's see. How'd you do? Were you expecting these numbers? Is this in line with what you would expect? Get this on a graph. So here we have our lovely bar graph. As we've now learned, this is a bar chart, bar graph. We see that Asian and Latinx are represented similarly, and whites, they're the most, as we would kind of expect because the US is still currently mostly white, and small proportions of Black and foreign and other. Is this what you guessed or would have expected? Was it off? Were you over or underrepresenting any particular races or ethnicities? And if so, why do you think you were? Were you basing it on the US's racial and ethnic demographics? Basing it on your hometown where you were exposed to more people of a certain race or ethnicity? Now let's take a look at the racial and ethnic demographics of the United States population for 2019. So take a minute, try to fill this one out. What percent of the population do you think is white, non-Latinx, Black, Latinx, Asian, foreign, and other? And spoiler, there's not going to be a number for foreign. I put it in there because the UT one had those demographics, but the United States Census does not report that, so you can just leave that one NA. So take a minute, pause me. You're just letting it play, aren't you? Pause me. Try, why not? All right, let's see how you did. Did you overestimate any of the races or ethnicities? Here's a graph of the US's racial and ethnic demographic, and this looks quite different from our UT sample. We have a lot of low figures here and one pretty high one for white. So how do you think our UT sample compares to the US population? So here we have the UT versus US population demographics with UT in orange and US in gray. So if we look at white, we can see that white is being underrepresented. If the US has about 63% white, UT has about 38%. Now with Black, UT is now underrepresenting the amount of Black people in the population compared to the US population. If we look at Latinx, Latinx is being overrepresented, and Asian as well as being very overrepresented, and other is somewhat on par. So this is an example of how a sample may not always represent the population it is meant to represent. Now that we have an idea of how to take a sample, hopefully when you read any sort of research article or news article, the first question you'll be asking is, how did they get their sample? Was their sample representative? And how big was it? Now that we know what goes into a good sample, let's see what we can learn from our samples, and we're going to be introduced to a new distribution, a very special one, called the sampling distribution. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!